Hello, and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Today I'm going to tackle a question that often gets asked in the comments, which is, how do I write an effective letter to my member of parliament or some other government official? Because you don't want to write a letter that is counterproductive. You don't want to write one that drives someone away from the position you're trying to convince them to, or worse, that they can use as ammunition against your side. So it's very important to be sort of careful in terms of how you write letters. Now, lawyers are actually a pretty good group of people to ask this, because as much as TV and movies focus on the showy parts of law, the cross-examination, the impassioned speeches to juries or judges, a lot of lawyering involves writing letters. Dear other side, here is why I think you're going to lose. Here's what I think we should do about it. Send. And so there's a lot of files that get won on the basis of a good letter. Now let's have a look at a sort of sample fictional letter I've drafted, and this is a bad letter. This is a terrible letter, but we can fix this letter up. So this letter starts as, "Hey moron, unlike you, I work for a living. I've been a cheesemonger for 30 years, not some paper-pushing waste of air. I hope you're happy with yourselves. You idiots are what is wrong with this country. What made you think that Bill 6, the Cheesemonger and Basket Weaver Regulation Act, would be a good idea? Did your UN paymasters demand this? This bill is going to put me out of business. My kids will have to beg on the street. My wife is selling the gold fillings out of her teeth. Get bent, Joe. P.S. Next time, maybe run your bill past an 8-year-old so they can point out how dumb it is before you screw things up." Don't send this letter to your MP, because it will not be appreciated. And if they read it, they will not be inclined to agree with your position. However, this letter has all the ingredients, or at least many ingredients, that should go into a good letter. So we can rehabilitate this letter. We can take this letter and turn it into a good letter. Let's dive in. So right at the start, I've got a salutation. And often email correspondence, we drop the salutation, but it can be worthwhile to include simply because politicians tend to be a fairly conservative lot, and they also often like seeing their titles. So instead of "Hey moron," we'll put Honorable Robert Paulson. Address them by name and title. You can also put "Dear Sir" / "Madam," just be respectful and be accurate. Now, the next bit here is we want to include something about why they want to listen to us. And this bit has it. It's, I've been a cheesemonger for 30 years. So this is why somebody would care about your opinion on the Cheesemonger and Basket Weaver Regulation Act. But we can fix this up. I am one of your constituents. If you are, you should always include that. And a party member. Again, if you are, you should always include that. These are things that make them care about your opinion. I have been a cheesemonger for 30 years, and thus am intimately familiar with the industry. This is why they care about your opinion on this thing. The next thing we want to do is tell them what we're actually interested in. And, they mentioned Bill 6, the Cheesemonger and Basket Weaver Regulation Act. We want to focus their attention on the issue. So I am writing to discuss the proposed Bill 6, the Cheesemonger and I'm writing to discuss the proposed Bill 6, the Cheesemonger and Basket Weaver Regulation Act. Tells them what we're writing about, so now they understand where we're going. And now you want to give some specifics here as to what your opinion is and why. So this bill would cause immense harm to the, I can't type today, cheesemonger industry. It would unnecessarily regulate, rent it, I don't know. So, and would cause loss of jobs, reduced tax revenue, banning certain popular cheeses. Basically, we're just saying, here are the bad effects. Be specific, and you don't need to go into everything. 3 or 4 things is just fine. Here are some big issues, and you want to sort of hit the punchy things. You know, these are what the problems are with this bill. You know, loss of jobs, reduced tax revenue, banning certain popular cheeses. And keep in mind, if you're talking to politicians, these are the things that they are worried about. They're worried about tax revenue. They're worried about jobs. Primarily, they're worried about getting reelected. They're worried about accidentally blundering into something really unpopular because they've made a mistake. Nobody wants to do that. So pointing out how this is a mistake is a useful thing to do. So, you know, this bill includes some of that with, this bill is going to put me out of business. You want to frame things in the sense of the general as opposed to the specific, because if it's just, I am an angry cheesemonger, well, they don't really care about you personally that much, but they do care about larger issues. So this will cause job losses. You also want to keep things sort of within the realm of, you don't want to be too over the top. You know, my wife is selling the gold fillings out of her teeth. It might be happening, but it sounds so overwrought that they're going to find a reason to disregard that. You also want to avoid anything that smacks of conspiracy theory or, you know, being off in any way. So you may have issues with the UN, leave it out. It's not going to help. So did your UN paymasters demand this? The proper replacement for that is just nothing. So the next thing that they include is a suggestion for next directions. And in the bad letter, that suggestion for next directions is get bent. Well, that's not really something helpful. We want this particular person to know what we want them to do. So I hope you will oppose this bill, or at least advocate for necessary changes in order to preserve this industry. Specifically, I would like to see removal of the anti-rennet provision. I'm not a cheesemaker, so I'm just throwing some stuff in here. Removal of the cheese type bans. You know, just some specific things you want, because just saying, I don't like this, is not always super helpful. So now this includes things saying, you know, I would like to see removal of these provisions. So that is much more helpful than the initial direction for next steps of get bent. Now, I don't really like postscripts because we're not writing these things out with pen and paper anymore. There's almost never a reason for a postscript unless you are, you know, doing it for rhetorical effect. But the thing on the postscript here is actually a useful element, which is places they can go for more information. You want to direct them as to how they can engage with your cause. Now, depending on who you are, that might be, please feel free to contact me at contact information. So, you know, please feel free to contact me at number. But you might not be the right person to deal with this. You might not be somebody with expertise. You might not be a representative. So maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you're just, you know, a random cheesemonger as opposed to the grand high poobah of cheesemongers. And so instead you might want to say, I suggest you contact our local representative, Jason McCheese, at number/email address. who can fill you in on further details. This gives them a place to go in order to follow up, to get more information. You always want to give them some way to engage. Because I will tell you, most of the time they won't, but you want to leave that in there as a way for them to move on and to keep dealing with the issue. Again, this may or may not be call me, if you specifically, or it might be instead you want them to talk to someone else. And then I recommend you sign it in some fashion. So Joe Schmo, and you may want to re-emphasize who you are, local cheesemonger. So now we've got a much better letter, and it includes basically the same ingredients that we saw in our terrible letter. But this letter is one that I would hit send on. Now you might be saying, well, what should I do? Should I be sending these by email or should I be sending them by letter? And we're in the modern era. You don't have to pick one or the other. Most government officials you can send letters to for free. And if you can't send them a letter for free, it's not a whole lot for postage. Physical letters are great because they have volume. They are a thing that has to, if nothing else, be fed through a shredder. It's something where they can see letters coming in. Let's also talk about some reasonable assumptions or expectations for what your letter is going to do. Don't expect that your letter is going to change anyone's mind right away. Your letter is basically a snowflake. And I don't mean that in the pejorative, you are a special snowflake kind of way. I mean that in the many snowflakes can eventually be an avalanche kind of way. Now, it's rare that any of these issues are going to be an avalanche, but at least you might make the guy annoyed at how often he's got to shovel his driveway. If they start seeing that they're getting a lot of correspondence on an issue, that might raise that issue in their thinking and make them reach out, maybe not to Joe Schmo local cheesemonger, but they might say, you know what, maybe we should talk to this Jason McCheese guy. Maybe he knows some stuff that we don't. So you want to be seen in that regard. Your letter is probably not going to actually be read by the person you address it to. And the likelihood that it gets read by the person you're addressing it to diminishes the more important that person is. So if you're talking about sending it to a local city councilor, maybe they'll read it. If you're talking about sending it to, the prime minister, zero chance. It is not actually getting to his desk unless you happen to be, somebody who's got an inside track. But their assistants, their aides will, say, hey, listen, we're getting a lot of emails about this one issue. Maybe that's a thing you want to, look into. And if they're getting a lot of physical mail, that may also address that. So don't expect that you're going to get, an instant response. What you are almost certain to get back is you're going to get a letter along the lines of, dear sir, thank you for your correspondence. We strongly support Bill 6, the Cheesemonger and Basket Weaver Regulation Act, for reasons. And this will be the same letter that everyone else gets because it's just literally cut and paste, plug your name in and send it back. So that's really what you should expect. But the whole point of letter writing is that they may see the volume. And if you're lucky, sometimes they will get your letter and say, yes, I do want to follow up for some discussion. So you may occasionally get somebody who's willing to engage. Your odds of that go way up if you've written a better letter. I can tell you that first version will never get a reply. Or at least not a reply outside of just your standard form letter response. But this second letter, you might actually get somebody reaching out to say, hey, I'd like to discuss this issue with you. How do we do that? So it is important that you write, good letters. This same sort of thing can apply to writing, letters to the editor. If your local newspaper, again, there you want to change the style up a little bit. You're not so much directing it at the person as you are directing it at the public, but all the same things you want to include. Here is why you, the general public, should care about my opinion. Here is what I'm discussing. Here's the bad things it does, or the good things it does. Here's what I want to see happen, and then here's where you go for more information. Those are basically your steps. 1, why you care. 2, what you're talking about. 3, why it's good or bad. 4, what you want them to do. And 5, where you want them to go for more information or for more follow-up. And, 6, sign off as to, who you are. You're going to have much more effect with your letter if you're signing your actual name rather than if it's something sent anonymously. Last thing I want to address is who not to send letters to, and that's hostile advocacy organizations. So if Bill 6 is being pushed by the Anti-Cheese League, don't send the Anti-Cheese League a letter explaining to them why they're wrong, because they're not going to get your letter and go, hey, this is a really well-reasoned letter. It's persuasive. It lays out everything. All right, everybody, pack up. Everyone's fired. Go home. We give up. They're not going to do that. What they might do is, if your letter is a good letter, best case scenario, your letter goes into the shredder and nobody ever sees or hears from it again. It's just gone. But if your letter is a bad letter, or if there's some way they can take a quote out of context, they might use that letter against you or against your position. There is literally nothing to be gained from this approach. All you can do is lose. Don't do it. They don't want to hear from you. They don't care. And they're not on side. Save your time and attention for the people who might be able to make a decision and improve things. Now, some people ask me, hey, can you do like a sample letter and, we could just sign our names to it and send it off? I'm not sure that's the best approach. I shy away from that, but I guess let me know in the comments if that's something you still insist on or still want to see. The reason why I don't like that is that if somebody gets 100 of the same letter, they're not sure if it's 100 different people or one bot. So I feel like that's a lot less effective. The sort of pattern I've given here includes things that you just can't put in a sample, standard letter that you just sign your name to. Like, here's who I am and why you care about my opinion. Well, I don't know who you are necessarily, or why a politician would care about your opinion specifically, so I can't put that in there. And that missing bit makes the letter less effective. So it's much better if you can draft your own letter in your own voice and talking about your own personal circumstances, but still following these guidelines to make sure it's sort of on point and doesn't veer into the weeds. But again, let me know in the comments below if you think that's something you need, and maybe I'll draft some letters in that case. The other thing, Bill 4 continues to be controversial, so I'm probably going to do another video. I've been challenged on some of my assessments of it, so I'm going to do some discussion to back those up and to point out a couple of the places where Bill 4 seems to go wrong. So that'll be coming out. I hope to get that out tomorrow, but we'll see sort of how things go. I also want to thank everyone for supporting this video. Please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to see more content. At the $50 level of Patreon supporters, Sir Daniel Wicks of Alberta, Jason Elliott, Canada's National Firearms Association, North Central Process Service, Kyle Martin, Jean-Guy Toussaint, BCAMF.org, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. At the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited. And at the $20 level, Mark Whittington, Dale Nesbitt, Cameron Johnson, Andrew Elsich, Adam Meester, and Marc-Olivier Damour, as well as a whole bunch of you at the $10 level who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching, and I hope this has armed you with knowledge.